Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And we are thrilled today to have with us from American Majority, Ned Ryun.
Yeah, this is amazing. How'd this happen?
Well,
whose idea was this?
I think it was your idea, but Ned was gracious enough to say yes.
Whose crazy idea was this?
No, good to be with you guys.
Thanks so much for doing this, Ned. For those who may not know, I mean, if you're watching the video version of this, you'll recognize Ned because he's on Fox News quite often.
Ned is very active.
And Ned is
I try to be
the founder and CEO of American Majority, which is one of the real important grassroots organizations out there that actually does real stuff like train people how to be candidates.
Which is a passion of ours.
Yeah.
Obviously. Because
fantastic.
we know for a fact how many candidates we encounter on any given election cycle who are poorly trained.
Yeah.
Who have no idea what they're doing.
And Ned, one of the things I was just looking at and what's great, you can go to their website, americanmajority.org, and you can see the upcoming trainings and sign up, whatever. What I love is you've got one coming up in Vegas, and I love the title. Should I run for office? I mean, that is a fundamental question that so many people don't even ask, right?
This is one of the things, again, we've been around, it'll be 16 years in January, which is kind of crazy looking back on it, that we have been doing this for this long. But it really is about how do you equip people to go in and be successful. And again, as you guys noted, we still encounter, obviously a lot of people are like, I'm going to run for office, and then they don't understand the basics of how to put together a campaign plan, how to do fundraising, how to have a basic message. You know, how do you actually communicate your message to the voters and sell you as the product to the consumer, the voter, so that they'll actually vote for you? So it's been, I think it was a piece of the puzzle that it was missing. I would argue there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, because I'm a firm believer that politics is policy.
Yep.
That unless you win politically, all of the great ideas that we have will never get implemented into policy. So you have to know how to win. And we have to train people to run for the school boards and the city councils, county commissions, state house, state senate. And we do some congressional as well, but our focus is really state and local, to equip people on how to win. And I think this has been one of my frustrations with the conservative movement for many years, is that a lot of people have the mistaken idea that somehow we will win simply because of the goodness of our ideas. And that's not true. In fact, I think the left really continues to demonstrate that if you actually organize to win, no matter how terrible your ideas are, you're actually going to have a lot of success in winning political races and then being in the place to implement all of your terrible ideas. And I think the right needs to really, and this is, I tell people all the time, I swiped a page from the left. I really did at the very beginning when we started American Majority, looking at what they did in Colorado and putting together all this infrastructure in the state of Colorado and taking a deeply red state and turning it blue. And one of the things that they did was identify and train people to run for state and local office. So they've always been about winning elections. And we've been, sadly, I think, investing way too much time into policy and ideas. Hopefully we will shift more of our attention and funding into actually training and equipping people to win elections.
It's such a great point. I mean, you know, the Colorado blueprint was the wake-up call for all of us, right? And you actually did something about it. Everybody talked about it, but you actually have done something about it, which is awesome. And it's so true because, you know, we love to be philosophical. We love to be, well, we've got the great ideas. We have freedom. We have liberty. And fact is, if we can't win, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And all we're doing is having great conversations amongst ourselves.
We're all in the bubble.
Sadly, as the real world passes us by.
Yeah.
But I'll say one last thing before we move on. Not only do we want to, and are we equipping future leaders with American Majority, I think one of the things I really am going to hammer on moving forward is, once you win a political race and have political power, you better know how to use it. Because I think this is another gap with Republicans in office. They achieve political power and they don't know how to use it. The left gets political power, and by God, they are going to use it to the full hilt to make radical changes in our government and our society, our culture. Republicans had better figure out you're given political power for a reason, so you better know how to use it.
Yeah, boy. And if the last few months have not borne that out in the
Yeah, I was
US
just going to
House.
say, I mean,
good night.
the Republicans
Talk about squandering.
Yeah, I mean, they prove time and time again that every time they're given power, they squander it.
Yeah.
And with
Correct.
their own what they think is very principled infighting, and this is good for the debate of our fair republic, and yet they can't get anything done.
No. And as a
And then they
result,
get voted out.
yeah, we've gone from a five seat majority down to one.
Yeah, way to go, Kevin McCarthy. I mean, listen, I don't want to blame him too much. I think he should have waited around till next year.
Sure.
But again, the other thing too, though, that frustrates me a lot about Republicans, and I would argue conservatives, is they somehow think we're playing by the same rules as the left, right? That we're playing, according to the Constitution and all of these things. The Constitution to the left is a piece of paper,
Right.
that they will mold and make into whatever they want. They are not bound. In fact, they haven't been bound, I would argue, by the original intent of the Constitution for the last century plus, with the rise of the progressives like Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
And we have Republicans sitting in D.C. going, well, this is deeply unconstitutional. And the left's going, who gives a rip?
Right.
We're here to have political power.
Exactly.
We will use power. We will use force to actually implement our views, our ideas of the world. And we're playing by a completely different set of rules, and we're losing. I mean, I can't put it any other way. We are definitely losing and have been losing for a long time.
Yeah, no question about it. When you look at where things, you've been at this for 16 now. Well, let's back up actually a little bit, because you came into this pretty honestly. So for those that don't know, Ned Ryun's father, Jim Ryun, was an Olympic star, but also was a congressman. And
he was
from Kansas.
Yeah, he's in the House
right?
for 10 years. Right.
10 years. And that's how I got to know Ned, was through his dad, because I was working for John Shadegg, and
That's
Jim
right.
Ryun was one of the great true fighters in Congress. So tell us a little bit about, being the son of a congressman and how that got you, to where you are now.
So, long story short, he actually was talked into running for Congress back in May of '96 when he was running the Olympic torch through his hometown of Wichita, Kansas. Todd Tiahrt approached him and thought, you should run for the vacated 2nd Congressional District, because Sam Brownback was vacating that seat to run for Senate, because
Right.
Bob Dole was obviously running for president that year. So that was about 3 weeks before filing deadline. My dad did not take it too seriously until he was driving home with my mom, and then thought, we should pray about this. And 3 weeks later, he filed a run. He was in from '96 to 2006. So I graduated University of Kansas in 2000 and thought to myself, I'm going to go try DC out for a year or two, see what it's like, and then I'll move on. And that was 23 years ago. And
I'm
still
laughing
involved-
because we have how many friends who have said that?
Right.
I'm going to go
Oh,
try
yeah.
DC and
Right.
And
Yeah, no. So, been in DC, or the DC area, for 23 years now. Married, beautiful woman who's a saint, 4 kids, and been doing politics pretty much that whole time. I was in the White House with George W. Bush, which was very weird, by the way. When you're riding for the president of the United States and your dad is in the U.S. House voting against most of his major initiatives, which does tell you what kind of a person my dad was, that he had the strength and the moral courage to stand up and say, no, Medicare Part D and some of these other things are terrible ideas.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of pressure you're going to put on me. I'm not going to vote for it. And I believe John Shadegg actually, that was one of the more interesting topics, was Medicare Part D.
Medicare Part D. It's a story that I tell people. I was Shadegg's chief of staff, and I was actually in Phoenix at the time that vote was going, and I went through the batteries of 2 different cell phones during that basic.
Oh, yeah.
It was because they held the vote open for hours, and Shadegg kept
Yes,
an
they
open
did.
line in the cloakroom to me, because he would be, he'd every few minutes he'd come back. He's like, okay, well, they're telling me this now, and at one point, I mean, you could tell he was just really distraught, because Denny Hastert went up to him and said, look, I'm asking you as a personal favor, as your friend. To vote. And it's like, come on. I mean, it was excruciating. And so what your dad went through, what Shadegg went through, there were,
Right.
just a handful of the guys who voted against it, but they were under
20, was it
immense.
24?
I think it
It was
was.
something
Yeah.
like, I think it was about 2 dozen Republicans who stood firm. And yeah, I think my dad and John were sitting on the House floor together after they voted and trying to make sure everybody else held firm. But yeah, a similar instance in which Denny Hastert came to my dad, might have been right as he moved down the row
Right.
after talking with John,
Right.
put his hands on either side of my dad's chair and leaned in and said, Jim, what do you need? I will give you whatever you need, but I need you to vote yes for this. And my dad was like, I'm not voting for this. This is absolutely the wrong thing to do. I will not be voting for it. But you're right. They left the floor open for hours. Oh, who was it? It was somebody out of Missouri that changed her vote at the last minute, gave them the vote that they
Yeah.
needed to actually win. It was a shame. But, he was, so back to where I started with this, but it was very interesting being in that White House while my dad was voting against a lot of these things. I
Right.
left there, helped my dad raise money for his reelections for at least, I think it was a couple years. And then in 2003, started something called Generation Joshua, which was really aimed at getting more homeschool youth involved in politics, really doing civics education, but also real world political activity, where we would send people out for the last 4 days of an election to do
Yeah.
door knocks, phone calls.
Well, this
Did
is
that for a while.
yet another crossover with me and Ned. So I went out to Oklahoma in 2004 for the last 6 weeks,
Yeah.
like 7 weeks of Tom Coburn's race.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
we built up a phone bank operation, and at the last minute, Ned sent hundreds of Generation Joshua kids to Oklahoma, and we just crushed it. And
Yeah, it was,
I remember
it was a lot of fun.
that was amazing because I remember John Lerner was the general consultant on the race. I had just airdropped in because Shattuck said, "Got to go help Tommy," and Lerner and I are friends, but we butted heads a little bit. And he was a pollster, and so
Well, and that's how you got to know the great John Hart.
yeah. And then so on election day, I'm on the phone with Lerner, and he said, I said, I feel pretty good about it. He's like, well, it's going to be close. We're going to win by probably 3 or 4. And I'm like, John, we're going to win double digits. He's like, Sean, you don't understand politics. I'm like, no, I think I got it. And because I knew we had, 150 kids making phone calls for Coburn, and that was going to turn out the vote. And sure enough, Coburn ended up winning by 12.
Did he really?
He did.
I forgot that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he smoked everyone.
And I give
This was-
Generation Joshua 80% of the credit.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That was about 4 years that I did that, helped launch it, obviously, formed it. And then we had a lot of fun. Yeah, we would turn out 1,300, sometimes 1,500 youth and their parents on the campaign trail to get them doing those phone calls and door knocks. And then from there, really started having conversations summer to fall of 2007 with some people that had really studied the Colorado blueprint. And so we had these really interesting conversations, and then one thing led to another, and we launched, I launched with their help in January of 2008, American Majority, with the idea of going out and building a farm team. I call it a farm team of conservative leaders, right? Really, how do we get good men and good women involved in the process and equip them and give them the tools necessary to win?
Well, and what's interesting about the timing of that is that you then watched firsthand the insane organizing that the Obama campaign did in 2008 and how effective that was.
But I think the more impressive one, 2008, sure, was incredible, was historic. 2012 to me was truly took it to the next level on what the Obama campaign did. Because again, remember, going into 2012, a lot of us thought that Obama was deeply vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the more interesting conversations that I had with in January of 2013, in which I went up to New York City. There was an event in which about 150 of us were in the same room. And one of the panels was with the Obama field team. There was no Mitt Romney field team that was present that day, because I'm pretty sure it didn't exist.
They didn't have
if
a
I'm being
field team.
completely honest.
No, they didn't.
But
they didn't.
the Obama team, it was fascinating to me, in which they actually went through and detailed their 10-state plan, precinct by precinct, district by district, on how they were going to actually win those key votes. And it was a fascinating conversation for me to listen to. Obviously, they did It wasn't Orca. What was their thing? Narwhal. What
Yes.
was their?
Yeah.
Theirs was
yeah.
they Narwhal was theirs, and the Romney guys, because they were so arrogant, named theirs Orca because orcas eat narwhals.
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
guess
correct.
who won?
Which was a disaster. Yeah, but
it melted
but
down.
this to me was one of the most fascinating conversations I listened in on, in which they were discussing everything they knew was going to be, a literally precinct to precinct fight in these 10 key states. They had the data, they had the organizers, they were A/B testing messages, 4 different subsets of demographics. It was pretty fascinating to listen to on how sophisticated they were and how they were approaching winning re-election for Obama in 2012. And it's still something that I think we're catching. Some of us have caught on over the last decade or so in realizing that we have to be far more sophisticated in how we approach winning elections, digging in on the data, better technology, and how we're going to message and get our people out to vote and win.
Yeah, no question.
And good segue. I mean, looking into your crystal ball for the next year. I mean, what are we missing? What do we need to be doing
AB generation
now?
and Chase.
Yeah.
This to me is something. Listen, I was very optimistic about the midterms in 2022, and looking back on it, perhaps a little overly optimistic. But looking at historical trends, the polls, all of these things,
Sure.
I really felt like we were going to have a good year. Where we're going to have a massive red wave. Maybe not, but we should have gained, I thought, 20 to 30 seats in the House. I thought we should have made some pickups in the gubernatorial races, and I thought we had a very legitimate chance of taking the Senate. But it was obviously kind of a disaster, I think, last fall. And as I started sifting through the rubble of what should have been a good midterm for us, it really struck me as I started looking at the numbers that we had failed completely, I think, in absentee ballot chase.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the only bright spots last fall, Ron DeSantis was going to beat Charlie Crist by 10 points, right? A retread, not a very popular former Republican, now running as Democrat, not a lot of funding. Ron DeSantis was going to win. How did he go from winning by double digits to winning by pretty much 20 points? And it just started to really click with me that the Florida GOP has been doing robust absentee ballot chase, I would say, for the last 5 to 6, maybe even longer election cycles, in which they're spending, call it 10 million, 11, 12 million over the last 6 weeks, chasing 1.1 to 1.3 million Republican absentee ballots to get to 80% return, so that Republicans are close, if not dead even, coming into Election Day.
Yep.
And then they crush Democrats on Election Day voting.
Right.
And then you juxtapose that against Arizona, sadly.
Yeah.
I think there were, almost 1.1 million Republican absentee ballots sent out, about 65% return rate,
Yep.
in which you lose everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that to me really kind of a light bulb went off, in which I said, Republicans, we need to figure out how we're going to do more absentee ballot generation, and then obviously chase ballots to get to 80% return in all these key presidential states next year. So we've done some field tests this year with American Majority Action, our C4, in Louisiana. If anybody was paying attention,
Yep.
Jeff Landry won, in the jungle primary, which was pretty interesting because nobody thought that was going to happen. In fact, a lot of people on the ground in Louisiana didn't think he was going to get over 50%.
Right. They
In fact,
expected
they
a
were
runoff,
saying,
right?
yeah, they thought it'd be mid to high 40s, but they thought he was going to fall short by a couple of points. No runoff. He wins, as does the lieutenant governor. And
Right.
on the 18th of November, Republicans swept all the statewide. So that was one of the things where we took 4 key parishes, which Louisiana insists on calling their counties parishes. But we focused on 4 parishes in regards to generating more absentee ballots, which Louisiana has a funny rule: only 65 and older can have no excuse absentee ballot requests, and then chasing those ballots in. In Virginia, we focused on 7 state Senate districts, and underlying those 7 were about 12 House districts. 5 of the 7 were wins. 8 of the 12 House of Delegate races were wins, and we got to 80% in 6 of the 7 Senate districts.
Wow.
There's something to this.
Yes.
In which we have to get to 80%. But the one thing that I noticed that I'll say before I shut up here, in a lot of these state Senate districts, Democrats had sometimes a 2-to-1 advantage in regards to their absentee ballot universe.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually beat them on return rates, but their universe was twice as big as ours.
Yeah.
So it's something that we've really got to work on ASAP to get more of these low propensity Republicans. And by that, I mean 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4,
Right.
or even kind of semi-lapsed voters to start requesting absentee ballots, because this is what the left does. The left has gone after the low propensity voters to get them to request a ballot. And then they go and they actually know there's a ballot in this household. We're going to pursue it. We're going to get it returned. And so I've been telling the grassroots, and by the way, 85-90% of the grassroots agrees with me. There's been a little bit of pushback, but we've been training on how do you generate more ballots? How do you chase them with low propensity voters, get them to request? A lot of them are buying into this. And this is one of our big projects, has been one of our big projects this year. And it's going to go on steroids next year. Absentee ballot generation with low propensity voters, and then the absentee ballot chase in 5 different states to get to 80+% return.
Boy, that would be a game changer.
Well, it certainly would have been a game changer here in Arizona, and it most likely will be in the future.
Yeah. Well, we know
if that's the game, we have to be in the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
it is the game.
Yeah.
And Ned, we know we have got a hard stop, but thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And we're going to preach this everywhere. Grow the pool, get it out.
Well, here's the other thing. We're probably going to be in D.C. in April, and so we need to have you on the show because we're going to be doing it live
Let's do it.
over at CPI.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right.
Great. Hey,
Awesome.
thanks so much, Ned.
Thank you so
Go
much.
to AmericanMajority.org.
Appreciate it.
AmericanMajority.org. Thanks,
That's
everybody.
great.
Learn
Thanks,
how to
guys.
win.
Take care. See ya.